can see that what people see as a gun is actually just the top of Roy Kellerman's hair. And you notice it's the same light intensity as the top of Greer's head, the driver. And it's just sunlight reflecting off of his hair. Back then, all the men wore hair grease. So, you know, it was shiny and it reflected. And Greer's hands are on the steering wheel, nevertheless the steering wheel. However, I will say that Greer testified to the Warren Commission that he never looked back and didn't even know the assassination had happened until Kellerman next to him said, "We're hit, get us out of here." And yet what can clearly be seen on the films is that in the next film, at the time of the first shots, the brake lights come on the limousine and it slows to almost a complete stop. And contrary to his testimony, Greer turns and looks back over his shoulder right at Kennedy until after the fatal headshot. Then he faces forward, the brake lights come off, and the car accelerates. This is why Clint Hill, the Secret Service agent, was able to jump off the Secret Service follow-up car and jump onto the rear of the limousine because it came to a stop and they almost bumped bumpers. And the clincher there is that he was the only Secret Service agent to react, and he wasn't even supposed to be there. He was included at the last minute at the request of Jackie Kennedy, who said, "Clint Hill's assigned to me, and I like Clint Hill, and I want him along." So he just showed up at the last minute, and he's the only one that responded. Now, on frame 257, we can see Kennedy's already been hit, and you can see what his head looks like under normal lighting conditions. By 357, you find this dark patch painted on here, and in my new updated version of Crossfire, you'll find that there are now 11 Hollywood experts in film and in film manipulation, who say that is a crudely painted on patch. They altered the Zapruder film. In fact, you can't even believe the Zapruder film anymore, because now in my first edition of Crossfire, we raised questions about if it had been altered. There's no longer any question, because two of the CIA people who worked on the film that weekend, that Saturday, are now on the record saying, yeah, we were there and we worked on it. And they even came up with blow-up slides that they were going to present to the head of the CIA. So the CIA had the Zapruder film before it was turned over to Time Life on the Monday following the assassination, and it's been altered. Altered evidence. Now, I'm sure some of you have seen the TV specials where they say, well, it's perfectly possible for one shot to go through two men and cause all these wounds and stuff, you know, because we've done a computer analysis. All right, well, if a computer analysis does it, it's got to be right, right? Well, here's my computer analysis, you know. Shot came, went through the tree, hit a sign, back, hit him in the throat. Of course, that's the way it works. Hey, you can trust this. It's a computer analysis. All right. My point is that any computer analysis is garbage in, garbage out. It's totally dependent on the quality of the information you put in. If you put in incorrect information, you're going to get an incorrect conclusion coming back, which to talk about the two surveyors, Dallas County Surveyor Bob West and his associate Chester Brenneman. On Monday following the Friday assassination, they were hired by Time Life to do survey of Dealey Plaza, elevations, distances, the whole thing, which they did, along with some Secret Service people and Time Life people. And they told me, and I've interviewed both of them, and they both told me that nobody involved in these tests could believe that one person did all this. They didn't believe that, okay? Later that spring, in May of 1964, both men, Bob West and Brenneman, again were hired by the Warren Commission to do the survey work in Dealey Plaza. And this is their actual plat map that they did for the Warren Commission. Oops. And up here they said this area hid behind a tree for any shot from the depository as of May 1964. Well, that's the one I just got through talking about. You can't get a line of sight. They couldn't then, and they marked that on their map. They also found a bullet mark on the curb over here. And then they also found these 2 yellow marks on the curb, and this is really fascinating. I was unaware of this until a few years back when somebody mentioned that, and then I went back and looked at the Zapruder film very, very closely, and you can actually see these little bright yellow streaks pass by as the car moves down the street. About 2 foot in length, bright yellow paint, and then nothing for about 10 feet, 10 or 12 feet, and then another 2-foot stripe of yellow paint. And in fact, if you go over there today and get down and look real close, you'll still find pieces of that yellow paint still on the curb on the south side of Elm Street over in Dallas. What the heck's that all about? Yellow? If it's no parking, the whole curb should have been painted red. If it was some kind of caution thing, then the whole curb should have been painted yellow. But to have 2 little yellow stripes, and what happened right in between those 2 yellow stripes? The fatal headshot. This was a marker for snipers to know their distance, because I've talked to and have some friends who were snipers in Vietnam. My friend Craig Roberts in Oklahoma was a decorated sniper in Vietnam, and he told me how that when they would set up on the Ho Chi Minh Trail during the daytime, they'd go down and they'd take a tree branch and they'd break it to where it would dangle down at a 90-degree angle. And then when they got back up in their sniper position and were checking through their scope, they found that little broken branch, and that gave them their distance. And this is a very typical thing for sniper techniques. So with these 2 little yellow stripes, with this marking where the snipers would be, anyway, it was all marked. And needless to say, when you go find the Surveyor's map published by the Warren Commission, none of this is on there. It's all just totally taken off. And worse yet, when you look at the Warren Commission exhibit, what they did was take the Zapruder frames, each frame, and then gives the elevation and angle to the rise and line of sight, et cetera, and they showed me their original one, and these numbers are changed. The Warren Commission altered the frame numbers, so that alters the whole thing. And if you know anything about survey work or about even computer analysis, if you're off by 1/4 of an inch up here, you go out 30, 40 feet, you're going to be off by several feet. So what I'm telling you is you cannot trust any computer analysis if it's based on the Warren Commission numbers, because they altered the numbers and they've lied to us. We all have seen this cover of Life magazine. It came out in February 1964. The Warren Commission was just beginning to study the case. They hadn't even investigated fully yet. And yet we see the headline says, Lee Oswald with the weapons he used to kill President Kennedy, Officer Tippit. Early on, through the late 60s, it was always Oswald, the assassin of President Kennedy. That's what we were all bombarded with. Finally, enough people, and I know because I was working with the Star-Telegram at the time, and I raised hell, a lot of other people did, and finally, they got it through their head, wait a minute, he's never been legally convicted of anything, so they got to calling him the alleged assassin. Okay, I can live with that. But if you'll notice here during the past year or so, all of a sudden, alleged has gone away again. Now it's just the assassin. This is just programming, folks, just programming. And when you look at this picture, the whole thing looks pretty crazy anyway, because look, he's kind of leaning at an odd angle, you know. If you were to reverse this, you'd find he's way over here like this, and it's just not even possible to stand like that. And we notice that he's got the big, broad chin in the backyard photograph. And yet the Dallas Police mugshot shows he's got a little pointed cleft chin. And what happens when he was shown this picture by the Dallas Police? According to Captain Fritz, he said, I showed Oswald an enlarged picture of him holding a rifle, wearing a pistol. Picture had been enlarged by our crime lab of a picture found in the garage at Miss Payne's house. He said the picture was not his, that the face was his face, but that this picture had been made by someone superimposing his face. The other part of the picture was not him at all. He had never seen the picture before. Well, wait a minute. He said somebody superimposed his face, and let's look. Oh, look, there's a line that, and of course this is a bad reproduction, but this little line that's breaking the emulsion goes from one corner of his neck all the way over to the other corner of his neck. Is that where somebody pasted his face on top of somebody else's chin, exactly as he said? Well, here we have the two known, 133A and 133B, supposedly two separate photographs made by a handheld camera. He said his wife Marina held it like this, and you know, it's one of these, you look down the top of it and line it up, click it, and then you have to crank it and move the film. You go back and take another picture, okay? So obviously nothing in these two separate photographs should match up perfectly. Oops, except his face is an absolute match in both photographs. That supports exactly what Oswald himself said. That's my face, but somebody stuck it on somebody else's body. Now, suppression of evidence. We've all seen this picture. And that's been a lot of controversy and a lot of misunderstanding. Every time you see that in a national publication, they tell you she's trying to escape the car, or she's trying to help Clint Hill onto the car. None of that's true, all right? The reality is that she crawled on the rear deck of the car, braced her left hand, and reached out with her right hand and picked up a piece of his skull and or brain matter, and then turns around and crawls back in the car under her own power. This was verified by Dr. Jenkins, who said he encountered Jackie Kennedy, looked shell-shocked, and as she circled, I noticed her hands were cupped in front of her as if she's cradling something, and as she passed by, she nudged me with an elbow and handed me what she'd been nursing in her hands, a large chunk of her husband's brain tissue. I quickly handed it to a nurse. And Secret Service Clint Hill said, between the time I originally grabbed the handhold until I was up on the car, Miss Kennedy, the second noise I heard had removed a portion of the president's head, and he had slumped noticeably to his left. Mrs. Kennedy had jumped up from the seat and was, it appeared to me, reaching for something coming off the right rear bumper of the car, the right rear tail, when she noticed that I was trying to climb on the car. So, wait a minute, well, the confusion. I mean, it's obvious. She crawled back there, she got a piece of his brains or skull, and she had them in her hand at Parkland Hospital and offered it up. So, why all the confusion? Because, folks, that means if a piece of his head's on the rear deck of the car, he was shot from the front. And Oswald was high to the rear. Cover up again. And we've already seen that one. I don't know why it's in that one. We know that in the Zapruder film, you see he's waving and everything's okay until he goes behind the Stemmons Freeway sign. And as he comes back out, he's clutching towards his throat, and he's obviously in distress and has already been hit by a shot. Well, right at this point in the Zapruder film, if you look real closely, you'll see a blip because there's 6 frames missing. Time Life said, oh, well, it was damaged while we were processing the film. But in 2004, I was working with a Japanese network crew, and they managed to locate a fellow in California who was friends with Jim Garrison, the DA in New Orleans, and he had an original copy of this Zapruder film, and the 6 frames were in there. And just to show that it wasn't a fluke, they also located another person here in Texas who also had a copy of the 6 frames that were still in the film. And he didn't want to be identified, so I won't identify him, but his initials are Robert Groden. And, and they submitted these 6 frames to computer analysts in Poland and in Britain. And lo and behold, what did they find? The reason those frames are missing? I always thought it was to tighten up the time frame of the Zapruder film so they could argue their single bullet theory. But actually, the reason those frames are missing is because very clearly there's a shot that hits the sign. And there were witnesses who said a shot hit the sign. And the sign was taken down within days of the assassination. And I checked with the Transportation Department, Highway Department, who has the sole authority on these signs, and they said, no, we didn't take it down. We don't know what happened to it. Destruction of evidence. Dallas News reports all the people there in Dealey Plaza, including Dallas police officers who encountered men with Secret Service identification. Don't come back here, everything's okay. and showed him identification. And oddly enough, one of these people who encountered one of these Secret Service agents was Lee Harvey Oswald. When Inspector Kelly of the Secret Service went to interview Oswald on Sunday morning, he said, "Are you FBI?" Very belligerently. He had something again. There was a problem with the FBI, and he said, "No, I was with Secret Service." So Oswald says, "Oh, well," he said, "I'm a member of the Secret Service." And Oswald said he was standing in front of the textbook building and about to leave it. A young man rushed up to him and said he was from the Secret Service, showed a book of identification, and asked him where the phone was. And Oswald said he pointed